I'm Reuben and I'm the Managing Director at Smudge. Smudge is a software development firm that helps people solve problems in their business with custom software. We've created this series to help customers learn more about the software development process and the key things that set development projects up for success. Hey, it's great to be here with Tim Chesney from Make. We worked with Make for a number of years now and I'm really excited to bring this episode to you to have a chat.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. So just to get started, just tell us a little bit about your background and then how you started Make.
Well, my background's kind of windy, I guess. I have a BSc in biochemistry, which has proved completely, well, I guess functionally useless. Perhaps it's been useful in some ways. And then through kind of a windy path, kind of ended up running a music studio, learning how to code, and then landed a job as a youth marketing person, which kind of turned into marketing type jobs and roles in various places. And yeah, from there, started our own business doing the recording studio, music kind of stuff. And we found out, as everyone does, that music studios make no money at all. This is me and my business partner, Ben. And so I was like, well, I should probably try and find some more revenue from somewhere. And that was how Make was born. Was like, what else could we do with our time that we have lots of? So yeah, that was where it came from. Okay. And the name Make was really, we'd kind of been just doing stuff under the studio name, which was the sitting room, which actually still exists to this day. Okay. And we were applying for a big RFP, and we needed something that wasn't a studio. And so I think at the 11th hour, we were like, oh, we just need a name. And we're like, well, we're making stuff. Let's just call it Make. And originally it was actually called The Make Collective because we were doing a lot more, the idea was to be a lot more collaborative. So it was like, we were just going to do account management and strategy, and then all the doing, the actual creative bits were going to be outsourced. And that was how Make kind of got going. And then we, over time, realized we kind of needed a bit more control over the creative process. And so we kind of grew to do the doing part as well.
Okay. That's so many interesting things there. One story I want to share is just because our company name was very similar, that we had made an app for the first time, and we're like, oh, we need to come up with a name, and we looked at the phone fingerprints, like the fingerprints on the screens, it's like, oh, smudged, and we just called it Smudge. Yeah. So, yeah, I love the name Make as well. I think it's such a good name for talking about creation.
Yeah, I think it's one of those weird ones where, or like all names, after a while, it doesn't mean, well, it just means the thing that it is, kind of like Smudge. Yeah. Like you don't really think of Smudge as Smudge anymore. Yeah. It has its own meaning after a while. So, yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I kind of wish it was a different name, but then at the same time, it's hard to think of something that I'd like better, and it is kind of just who we are now. So,
How much help do you do naming things for clients? Is that something you do much of, or like a little bit? Do people invite you into that process?
We probably do like 1 or 2 naming things a year.
Okay.
Yeah, so not loads. Yeah. Yeah, so I think we really like doing naming because it is really interesting. And I think the whole like how the human brain works with names, as we're just saying, is like very strange because the first time you hear a name, especially like if it's like a bit made up or it's in like a funny, or out of like what you're expecting, it can be very jarring and hard to imagine your company being called that thing. But then when you go away and use it for, I don't know, a week or 2 weeks, it slowly slips in from like word territory into name territory, which I really enjoy, that process of like it becoming the name. So we once named like quite a big company that had, I don't know, 280 employees and a bunch of subsidiaries and all this stuff. And yeah, it was really interesting watching it go from a word to a name. Like it took like 2 or 3 weeks, and suddenly it was just like everyone was just referring to it as that. It was quite fun. Yeah,
that's cool. I always find when we're naming just an app or a feature or something, I always want to like try it on for a couple of weeks before you start sharing it more widely. Just understand, does it really fit in all these scenarios? How does it actually feel using it for a bit?
Oh, definitely. And we do the same thing. Like if we present names, we kind of go, maybe don't tell us what you think now. Go away and act like it's the name and just use it a little bit and see how it feels. And you may come back and go, we really hate this and we need something different. But you might come back and go, we love it. Yeah. The other weird thing we've found with naming is we've kind of changed our process with naming, because we used to be, I don't want to say secretive, but almost secretive about how we'd go about things.
Okay.
So we'd do a whole big process behind the scenes, but then we kind of were worried about sharing all of that complexity and creating confusion in the client. If you went back with, say, I don't know, your top 5 names, and then you said, here's our preferred one, and here's our big list. I think our worry was always that everyone would really struggle to focus on one. And so we'd kind of had this process where we'd do all this work, but then we'd just come back and we'd present the name, and we'd also often present a whole visual concept, like quite thought out visual concept. Because we kind of felt like if you saw it in context, it really helped you kind of understand it. But we've actually changed our tune the last couple of years and kind of been a lot more transparent and brought the client in much earlier on all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And all of my fears were completely unfounded, and it's been actually really good. And I think quite often clients really enjoy getting to be involved, and they feel more of a sense of ownership at the end. But weirdly, with the bigger company we did, I asked the CEO, do you want us to do it this more secretive way, I guess?
Yeah.
And he was like, no, I want you to come back with the answer and the whole answer and one option and nothing else.
Okay.
And he's like, if we hate it, then we'll pay more to figure that out. But he's like, I'm backing you to have the right name. Because I think he was very worried about it just becoming like a bit of a consultation fest. So, yeah, kind of interesting. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, we've dove pretty deep into names. I think we could spend probably an hour just talking about names.
I'm sure some people definitely could, yeah.
But I think it would be good just to jump back a little bit and go, we both run software agencies to some degree. I think we'd probably, in the industry, probably call your agency a digital agency.
Yeah.
And I call maybe what we do more a software agency. Like, very similar terms. Where do you think the line of what you start doing starts and ends, and where do you think we start? And I can sort of share a little bit as well in there, but where's kind of a great space for you to work with customers?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, definitely for us there's normally a brand component to what we do, and that runs from visual stuff right into that digital space. And I think obviously an experience and how something works is still part of the brand, but I guess like for us, probably where we start and stop would be where is that kind of visual expression of the brand running right through everything, including whatever the end digital product might be, which could be a website or a smaller app or just about anything really. So I think for me that's where whereas I think I'm kind of speaking for you here, but
you ask me and I can tell.
Well, yeah, my impression would be that for you guys it's that what the brand looks like the actual above the line kind of brand may not be as much of a consideration. It's actually really how does it work, what does it do, and obviously it's still going to be designed and a lot of care goes into that, but it's less of a visual expression of the brand. But that's just what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's bang on. I think for us, we'd very rarely get involved in a brand conversation. We really care about a brand and how an organisation wants to present, because we want to understand that to inform what we do, but it's an input as opposed to something that we're touching or making changes to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think there's definitely a big if you're doing the Venn diagram, there'd be a bunch of stuff in that middle zone where I think we could both companies could do it and would do a really good job of it.
Yes, yeah. I agree. I think there's things around just creating a website and solving a problem, doing some design kind of work. There's some pieces there. But yeah, I agree. I think you're coming from a brand side and then doing those pieces of the puzzle, and then us coming from a solving problems kind of like software user experience kind of. When you do user experience as well, that's kind of in the middle. But maybe it's the solving problems kind of piece is the...
Yeah, I think also there's that, from what we know from working with you, the way you approach stuff, I think is more it's a system-wide kind of approach. And I guess we would have some of that, but I think, it's kind of more of that kind of infrastructure, how the whole thing goes together, where it fits into the big picture, solving a real business problem, which we do less of. Well, I guess we still solve business problems, but they're normally visual or communication problems.
I think it's probably more whereas we don't really focus on communication problems. It's more internal workflow, productivity kinds of problems.
Yeah.
One of the things I've really enjoyed about working with you is just that engagement around, working on the particular website problems or some of those things, because even though they're things that we can do a little bit of, I really enjoy also coming from a customer perspective and not having to do some of the detail work that we do for other projects, but that I've got other projects that I'm working on, and I know that you're just going to solve and fix that other little part, which is quite a good experience to have. How do you know, when you're looking for customers, who's going to be a right fit for a customer? How do you find the ones that are coming from a brand perspective and want to do that and make good changes, as opposed to just want to do maybe a digital project and aren't happy to look at the wider things they need to change as part of communication?
Good question. I think when it comes to trying to figure out who is the right customer, I'm 14 years in and still feel like I'm not very good at it, to be totally honest. I think people can say a lot of the right things, and then you get in there and you realise along the way that actually maybe this company is not really in a position to ask or answer some of these bigger questions. And I think one of the biggest... Have you just got a specific example, so when you're going through the detail of design or building a website, and what breaks that it goes, oh, this isn't quite working? I think probably, the biggest tell for me is actually if someone doesn't really know what their core offering is or what their product actually is, and they're kind of looking to us to tell them who they are. And I think there's a difference between wanting to be told who you are, and that kind of, how do we explain who we are? That's our job, and we love doing that. But I think the biggest worrying sign is when the client themselves feels really uncertain about what they're actually doing and what their kind of core offering is, what their values are, and what really matters to them the most. And so that normally flares up when you say, well, what's important here? What are we actually trying to achieve? How do we know if this is going to be successful? What are we going to look at? And they say, well, you tell us. And that's always a sign when I go, ooh, uh-oh. It's not like the death knell of a job, but I think it's a sign where you go, okay, we need to probably proceed a little more carefully, because this can get into very subjective and tricky ground where we're not sure what we're doing. The client's not sure exactly why they're doing it. And it sort of becomes a bit like a surface job, I guess, which we don't really enjoy very much. We much prefer to try and actually be expressing something that's real rather than the reverse.
Okay, that makes so much sense. So it's like mission, vision, values. Sometimes they can sound a bit tired if they're just going through a corporate way of speaking, but it's actually, when those are fundamental and you've got those right, they drive other decisions and they become your decision-making framework.
And I think it makes all those other decisions a lot easier, because you kind of have something to look at and say, well, we know where we're going, we know what we're trying to achieve, so this fits into that, or actually, no, this doesn't fit into that, and you've got kind of something to look at.
Yeah, because otherwise design is just, well, which colour's better?
Which is the last thing we want to get into.
Because it's not actually helping. Well, what is the narrative? What are we trying to convey? What is the messaging? What are we trying to communicate?
Yeah. And that's another, obviously I don't know, you can probably answer this question as well, but do you have, it's those experiences where I think, obviously the sign that I think any agency or service-based business would see as being a warning sign would be second guessing a lot of things that would be considered the agency's domain. And I guess colour would be an absolutely classic one, where we've had a client going back a couple of years ago. There was a hotel chain, and they were owned by quite an eccentric individual, one individual. And basically we got tasked to kind of work out a whole new, try and bring all these properties into one job and under one brand. And really quickly got into this really subjective territory around, well, which colours was best, and I don't like that colour, and this one's weird, and why have you used that font, and all this kind of stuff, which are all valid questions. But I think for me it comes back to, why are you getting external involvement with someone like an agency, and are you willing to trust us to do our job? And I think as soon as that someone's not willing to trust you to do your job, and that could be our fault as well as the other person's fault, then I think at that point it's really hard to do good work with that person and to end up with an outcome where everyone feels really happy. So, 'cause I don't know, have you had that experience where like it's you, because I don't know, because often I look at what you do, this is very like from the outside, and I think you mustn't have those kind of really annoying subjective conversations quite as often, because like normally you're trying to solve a problem and it's more objective. Is that fair or not fair?
I think you definitely still end up in some subjective conversations. I think the one that gets, probably where it gets a bit tricky, is often like a technology decision. Which technologies are you going to choose to build this particular thing or create the thing that you're after? And there's lots of different ways you can solve that particular problem. But trying to work out what the best fit is for what you want to achieve can be very challenging. There's a reasonable level of upfrontness that we probably have more of those conversations up front that don't go anywhere, as opposed to people that then become customers. Because I think if someone wants to solve a problem in a particular way and we're not able to help them solve the problem in the way they think they need to solve it, then we're not progressing much further. So I probably have earlier on conversations, but less work conversations.
Yeah, I think we're getting better at asking things early on to try and avoid those conversations, because I don't know, they're the worst basically. They're just, it's just horrible for everyone, like us and the client. Like, it's not fun for anyone at that point. Luckily we haven't had that many of those things, I should say, but
Well, I think it sounds like from your experience, really having a customer who understands why they've come to you, what their core vision is, the core offering that they have, then you're fantastic to be able to help how to communicate that, how to represent that to market, how to present it in a way that their customers can understand.
Yeah, I think that's where we can definitely add the most value, is like that part of the process. So I think, I think obviously the other thing for us is very key is like, do the values of our own personal values, I guess, or business values, align with theirs? And there's certain companies who we just wouldn't be interested really in working with probably. So there's probably a bit of a filter there.
What, maybe over the last 5 years, just thinking about web design now, what are some major things that you've seen change from a user experience perspective, from like what's possible, from search engine kind of targeting, from content, like what are just some, it's a pretty big topic, but what are some major things that you kind of think about when we talk about that area?
I think on the positive side, one of the big things we're seeing a lot more of now is like accessibility coming through into web design and web development. In the past, it was, at best, a total like last-minute add-on thought, or maybe not even thought of at all. And I think now that general awareness of accessibility is something that you can and you should implement, and doesn't need to be really scary or super hard or slow you down too much, has, I think, come to the forefront a lot more. And I think in general, sites are becoming more accessible, which I think is really, really good. So that's a nice one. I think, obviously...
I wonder that there's just the fact that you need to support so many devices now, there's probably a period maybe 10 years ago where you ended up with very desktop specific sites that had a kind of like specific scrolling experience and like ways of working that were less about content hierarchy and more about like positional elements. I don't want to be starting to get a little bit in the weeds, but it's kind of like, oh, we're going to put this here, we're going to put this here, and this is exactly what it's going to look like. Whereas just the move to having so many different device types with portrait, landscape, mobile devices, desktop devices, you have to really think about content hierarchy and what's important from that perspective. And the visual style is actually surrounding that a bit more. Would that?
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I think the fundamental way the hierarchy of the information you're kind of putting into the page, you have to know that the layout of that's going to be fluid. And I think because of that, people are less attached to a particular size or look or design, because everyone knows that it looks different whichever device you jump on. And sometimes not drastically different, and sometimes drastically different. So yeah, I think that's a real positive thing. I think on the negative side, all the tracking and analytics and all that kind of stuff has always been there, but the extent to which it's ballooned in recent years, I think it's kind of got completely mad. And I totally understand our customers want information, but I think the downside of it is like we're just downloading, hundreds and hundreds of megabytes of mostly worthless JavaScript for no apparent reason. And I think a lot of the tracking that goes on and the number of scripts we put onto websites these days, is just a real downer for the web in general, and I think makes things slower unnecessarily, or you have to take up that slack in development and try and push all those scripts and all the JavaScript overhead into another place that doesn't affect the user experience. So I think that whole side of things, obviously all the cookie banners that come with it and everything else, I think that's degrading the web experience in like a significant way for a very limited gain in most cases. So that would be a big negative. But I've so far had very little luck convincing clients that we should have less stuff on there, because I totally get it. Like if you don't get the information, then what if I want to use that one day or whatever? Like I can kind of see how you get there, but I do think it's a shame.
Slightly different topic, but when did you kind of discover that you'd enjoy being a developer?
Well, this is going to age me.
Okay.
But it was when I first tinkered around with Adobe Flash.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Was it even owned by Adobe then?
I don't know I can't remember who first owned it.
Adobe.
It was Macromedia. Wasn't it Macromedia?
Oh, Macromedia.
Yeah, Macromedia, and then Adobe bought Macromedia.
Yeah.
I think.
So
that's like predating my interest in knowing who bought who. But I remember the brand of like Macromedia.
Yeah, I think you're right. That rings a bell. Anyway, so I tinkered around with Flash for some reason.
Okay, just maybe some animations or something.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to like see, because do you remember how there was that era, like I guess like late 90s, early noughties, where like whole sites were just Flash.
Yeah.
And that was all it was. And so I think tinkering around with that, for some reason it felt, because you could just draw stuff onto a canvas, and then you could make like a tween just by having a starting point and moving it and having a stopping point.
Yeah.
It was kind of like programming light, I guess. And that was, for me, it was kind of like the gateway drug to being like, oh, this is very interesting.
Yeah.
And then from there, like, well, I want to have like more of these things, and I want random movement, and I want blah, 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 blah. And so you start learning ActionScript, which is actually really similar to what JavaScript is these days. And that was kind of a start. And then I also, for some reason, decided to import longboard skateboards from the States and Canada as like a business thing.
Yeah.
And I borrowed some money off a family friend and then needed like a way to sell them. So I had to learn some PHP to make a shopping cart, because there wasn't really anything out there at the time. There was like WordPress, but there wasn't like WooCommerce or any of this stuff. And so I had to learn how to make a thing, which was probably like the most insecure payment thing on the planet. But it worked, and I sold some skateboards.
Okay.
And yeah, that was kind of how it all started. And I think that's why I still really enjoy just writing HTML and CSS, because it felt so magical to me back then, just to be able to, understand this kind of, something that not everyone understood, but once you kind of got it, it was really satisfying, and it was like sort of putting a puzzle together.
Yeah.
And there was something really nice about that, and that just kind of turned into making some websites and basic stuff. So, yeah. And I took a long break actually from doing any programming, like probably 8 to 10 years where I did hardly any programming at all, just like a little bit.
Yeah.
And then about 4 or 5 years ago was like, I actually really enjoyed doing that. I don't know why I stopped. And so got right back into it and now doing lots of it.
Yeah, okay. I was really hearing just about that whole, just the malleable, or like the getting to see the result of making something. And I've seen that experience through people who have like come through our company, and I've had that experience myself where it's like just that fun of, oh, this thing didn't exist, and you get to like make it, try and understand how it works, and then be able to make the thing that you actually see in your head.
Yeah, I think that's what makes it so satisfying, is because the other thing is like it can be very immediate as well. It's not like, say, woodworking or something where it might take you a long, long time. I feel like with coding, you can get started and often get something that's vaguely what you want quite quickly, which is really cool. When did you know? At what kind of age was, this sounds like a different guy was like, when did you know? Like when did kind of the code thing happen for you?
I remember, I don't know if I've said this here before, but I remember when I finished university, so I studied computer science at university, and I sort of finished and I was like, do I even really know how to program? Because you learn all the fundamentals and all the rudimentary things, but never actually make a whole lot of useful things. And then it was probably actually starting this company where I actually started going, oh, I know how to do this because this is what I did a degree in. But like, you never kind of like was taught quite how to plug it all in together. And so it was probably even just that first few years of building iOS apps, and I really, really enjoyed it. But I've always known I've loved solving problems for like a very, very long time. It's just, it gets me out of bed each day, definitely.
Yeah, that's cool. I feel like I got into what I do probably more from being nosy than wanting to solve problems, I think.
Yeah.
Because I enjoy the aspect, this sounds kind of bad, but I really enjoy when you get to poke your nose into someone else's business and you see under the hood and all the issues and the good things and the bad things and how things actually get made and how things work.
Yeah.
Like I really enjoy just that curiosity factor of like, well, how does this work and what do you do and all those kind of things. And I think out of that comes, I think that's good, makes me good at what I do because I love to learn about the big picture and I really enjoy like trying to understand what is happening. And I think out of that you can then offer really good solutions and strategies and stuff. But I think often it's that nosiness in a way that actually drives me. Yeah.
Interesting. I definitely have a part of that as well where I love just learning about new things. Like I'll quite happily just make something to learn about it, or that's really fun. I definitely don't have the patience for doing woodwork though, or anything that require. I think the thing is for me, anything that is like non-destructive or like destructive, you have to have a destructive process to do, I'm not a big fan of.
Yeah, because this is a really interesting point because often I say to people, because they go, oh, programming's so scary or it looks so, so freaky. And it's like, well, the great thing with coding is like you literally can't break anything. Unless you are an idiot and you're hacking away on like someone's FTP server on their live website.
Sure.
Like, don't do that, everybody.
Don't do that.
Like you literally can't break anything. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And you can just go, oh, let's try this. And if it doesn't work, you just, worst case scenario is lots of control-Zing, but you probably have like a Git branch or something. You just delete that branch and go back to how things were and you get a fresh start. Whereas like you say, like I do a bit of like woodworking and spoon carving and these kind of things, and they can be so frustrating because if you make a mistake, which when you're learning you're going to make lots of mistakes, you can ruin a day's work and you're back to square one, and there's nothing more dispiriting than redoing something you've already done, trying to get back to that point that you were before where you made the mistake.
Yeah. I think it's something that, even relatively inexperienced developers get quite quickly, which is just having a very good understanding of version control and different like environments and working out how many environments you need for the thing you're solving, because it makes a big difference as to just that freedom of expression where you go, oh, I know the thing's running in production, that's fine, that's doing whatever it's doing, I know how that works, but I'm playing here in this development environment and I can do whatever I want because it's not connected at all, and I can try changing that thing and see if it does what I want it to do, and sharing it with people and getting feedback and being able to iterate like that.
I think that's what's really fun about programming is you can just go for it and just try the thing you want to try. And if everything dies, then it doesn't matter. You just go back to where you were and have another try. Yeah, it is very freeing like that.
Yeah. It is fun enough. What I love about probably 3D printing over making things out of, say, wood or other products, because you basically just get to start from scratch every time. You can just change a parameter on the computer and then you print it didn't work and it's like, oh, okay, I just need to change that one bit, and then you can just have another go.
Yeah, which is great. Yeah. And the sign is testament
I know.
to the 3D printing skills of Reuben. Yeah.
So one thing we both have in common with programming, we also both run software agencies, digital agency, software agency. What do you think are some challenges that you find about running an agency?
Yeah, I think there's obviously lots of good things and bad things about running your own business, and I think one of the trickier things for me would be that trying to find the sweet spot of too much work and not enough work, and too much work and not enough work. And I think when I was, first getting going with the company, like we were like a, bad driver on a video game, like just smacking into the, doing this. And I think it's still a challenge for us. And because one of the issues I find for myself is like you kind of go through a phase of, getting some great projects, and then I really like doing the work, and so I get really into the projects. And so then I stop necessarily doing some of the things that I should be doing around, reaching out to people and keeping some leads warm and, these kind of things that you should do. Yeah. And I get very focused. And then you come through a really busy patch and suddenly you haven't really been putting in the work. And so you can kind of do this bouncing thing where you go, it's way too much, and then it's not really enough, and then it's way too much again. And I think I'm getting better at it, but that's still a challenge for us. And I think because we're small as well, like there's only 5 of us, like it doesn't take that much to go from, like a good amount to too much. On the plus side though, I think with 5 of us, like the worst case scenario isn't that bad. Like, sure. Because even if we don't have enough, it's not like gonna end us immediately. Like we've got quite a lot of runway, I guess. So I think one thing we're trying to do, I guess one of my philosophies would be to try and stay kind of deliberately smaller, or err on the side of small, because I find we're kind of in that lucky position now. We've been going for long enough, and we've done enough work for enough people that there's generally enough work. And so it's easier to say no to the thing that you're not sure about, or it seems like the less good fit, than it is to need to say yes to that because you've got a bigger beast to feed. So I think that's kind of where I've got to. And I wouldn't say like I'm anti-growth or anything. Like, I think that's a good thing. But I also think sometimes we don't value just a good business. Like if a business isn't growing, it's sort of not seen as successful. And I think for me, I often feel that as well. I'm like, I'm not getting bigger. What am I doing wrong? But actually, I'm trying to rewire my brain to go, actually, I think for what my skill set is, with my, say, somewhat lacking managerial skills, I would say, that we're probably the right size for what I want and the balance that I want. And I think becoming comfortable with that is something it's a process, but I'm more and more comfortable going, actually, I think this is what we are, and it works for us. Yeah. Yeah,
I mean, look, I can definitely relate to the bouncing off the sides kind of piece and just trying to get that right balance. And I think almost at any size, it's always a challenging thing just to work out what is the right size for what you need. But I also really hear as well with the growth piece, and it's like there's so many external factors that we can't control that relate to the work. And the thing we can control is how we show up, what we do, the kind of quality of our output. And all we can do is do the best at doing that. And I think sometimes if you start thinking too much about the external metrics or some things that might look good on paper, it can be easy to get carried away with that stuff and not worry about, actually, how am I delivering for my customer that's come in today that wants help with this problem?
Yeah, it's a really good point, I think, around like how the quality of the work you do, you can control. But as we all know, like if you especially run an agency or a service-based business, like sometimes a decision just doesn't go your way, or a project gets paused for totally external reasons that you can't possibly control. And I think the challenge for me is to not feel like, down or like less successful because we didn't tick this box or hit this number. And I think, I'd like to think anyway, as I'm getting older, I am less worried about some of those things and more worried about, are we doing work we enjoy is it fulfilling? Are our clients happy with what we're doing? Are we really solving their problem and helping them move along? And I think that's also kind of partly why I've moved away from hiring like younger people or less experienced people. And I think when I was in more of like a profit mindset, I guess, you think, oh, I'll just get someone younger because, you know, this is going to sound terrible, but they obviously don't cost as much as someone who's really experienced. And I'll just, you know, do the extra to try and, you know, fill in the blanks and make it all work. And what I've realised is I'm much happier when we have, like we do now, basically all senior people who really know their stuff and can just, you can throw them anything and know that they're going to deliver something you're really happy to stand beside. So I think that's been a big shift for us as well. Is kind of, and it means that like our overhead per hour worked is probably double what it was 7 or 8 years ago. But I think also the speed we can do stuff and the quality of what we do is much better. And also I'm less stressed, which I'm particularly concerned about. So yeah.
And it means you can show up and do the best job that you can do in the things that you're doing too, I think.
Yeah, and that comes back to the coding thing. Like switching to that model, I've got back into being able to do probably half my time actually making stuff, which is why I got into doing what I'm doing in the first place. Whereas it used to be all my time was just managing clients and projects and people. And it's still a lot of that, but
it's less, so you get to spend more time doing the craft.
Yeah, which I really enjoy and I think brings that satisfaction piece. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for coming in today, having a chat.
No worries.
It's good to spend some time talking about this stuff with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Thank you for watching. We really hope that you got something out of this conversation. If you have any questions that have arisen, please reach out on our website, smudge.com.